Hey everyone, welcome to the Thomas Blooms channel. I am your host Thomas Blooms, and today we're going to do a very short video. We're going to talk about companion planting and also seed spacing. Okay, so just give me 1 second here. Gotta do my promo, gotta support your team. Go Leafs go. Okay, now that that's over with, so today, like I said, we're going to talk about seed spacing. So I'm holding these up as examples. So this is sage, this is basil, and over here I got a package of romaine lettuce. But one of the most common things that you'll find on the backs of these is they talk about, how many days to sprout or to germinate, the seed depth, how low does it go, and seed spacing. And I'm going to talk to you about, they also talk about plant spacing as well. So what happens is that some seed companies on the back, they like to tell you, okay, plant your seeds 2 inches apart from each other, and once they get to a certain size, you got to thin them, which means pulling one out. What that does is that when you're planting two in a little area, the idea is one of those two will work. Not all seeds work 100% of the time, but they have a good high percentage. But just in case, one of them will work, or one of them works, but it doesn't look very healthy. Okay, just pick one out, and then you still have that one in that area. Okay, so that's why they talk about seed spacing and then plant spacing. So I'll give you an example. So here I'm holding up sage. Okay, so they say seed spacing have 1 inch apart, but plant spacing is 18 inches apart. Okay, so let's talk about plant spacing and why they say 18 inches. Okay, so normally when you see that, you interpret it, okay, if I want to plant 2 sages together, I have to plant them 18 inches apart to grow. I know the plant said 1 inch seed spacing, well, you thin one out, but normally it should be 18 inches apart. Well, that's where it's a little bit off in terms of what the seed companies are referring to. Seed companies are referring to the diameter, okay, of the plant. The diameter is the circle. So if you remember in would be maybe grade 5 or grade 6 math, your diameter is like, whatever it is in the middle, it's the diameter around that, okay? And then your radius is, from the middle to, in a straight line, to one edge of the circle. So, for example, here I got my measuring tape. 18 inches is this long, okay? So they're saying sage they don't recommend sage being closer to this. That is in fact wrong. It can be closer. They're referring to the diameter. So, for example, here is my sage spacing. The sage is here in the middle. Okay. You're still having an 18-inch diameter, but really what you're talking about for plant spacing is cut in half, because you're measuring from the radius out. So if that makes sense, what you could do when you read plant spacing is that when you see plant spacing at a certain percentage, you could actually cut that in half and plant at the halfway mark. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So if you see a plant spacing at 7 inches, that refers to the diameter. If you want the radius in terms of how far apart they could be, you can cut that in half, which is 3.5 inches. Okay, so please understand there's a difference between seed spacing and plant spacing. And you take advantage of that plant spacing by planting extra plants in that radius. So let's just say you're planting a whole bunch of sage. You could follow the directions on the seed planter, do 18, then 18, then 18, or you could do what is successful and cut it in half. What that means is that you can plant an extra sage in the gap that you normally would. And so if you're doing any sort of food gardening, that means that you can get extra food in your garden without harming or damaging the growth of the other plants around you. Okay? And what that also does is it lets you do companion planting. Companion planting is when you plant other plants of a different species beside other plants, and they either benefit each other or they're neutral to each other in terms that they don't do any harm. And there are 3 categories. There's beneficial, neutral, and harmful. like, and to give you some examples of beneficial planting, well, I talked about the three sisters in another video. The beans, the corn, and the squash. The corn goes straight up in the air. Beans, they need a support system, so they latch on the corn and wind their way up to make the beans. They also release nitrogen into the ground. Same with corn. And the squash, which is a heavy nitrogen feeder, they eat that extra nitrogen, but they grow on the ground, leaving shaded areas for your corn and your beans, so they don't get overheated this summer with the temperatures. So they all sort of benefit each other in a roundabout way. Another example is basil and sage. So basil and sage are really beneficial for tomatoes in terms of when you plant them in the ground, and even the smell that they give off, it repels bugs that would attack tomatoes. Now here's the little rub on that. Basil and sage are harmful to each other. So they both benefit tomatoes. The tomatoes will really enjoy having both in there. But if you're going to do this, don't plant basil and sage together. Separate them. Okay? Put a lot of distance in so that their roots don't come in contact with each other, and their zone of control is not overlapping each other. Okay? So there are beneficial plants to each other. There are neutral ones that don't have any effect whatsoever, so you can plant them beside each other. They just won't do anything. They're Switzerland to each other. And then there's the harmful ones. Like, for example, like putting things that require a lot of nutrients beside a potato. Potatoes are some of the heaviest feeders of all time in terms of plants. I don't put anything with potatoes. In fact, I put them in a bucket, which if you see my other video of outdoor planters, I mention potatoes in buckets quite a bit, because potatoes are fantastic for planting separately, because they're the heaviest feeders out there. They take all the nutrients out of the soil, and that's usually harmful to any plants around that. Okay, so you'll have to do your research into what you can plant together and what you can't. But I'm going to help you out, because it's easy for me to say, oh, go Google what works. So down below in this description, I'm going to open up a file in my Google Drive. It's going to be a PDF form. Okay, so if you see PDF, great. And I didn't make this. This was made by mysquarefootgarden.net, but it's a list of all the veggie plants and all the herbs and all that stuff and how they interact with each other. And it's all color-coded. So it's green, yellow, and red. Green means beneficial, yellow is neutral, red is harmful. And so you guys can check it out there and see how you can companion plant and use the Square Foot Garden to the best of your ability. Okay, because normally if you follow directions of the seed, you will end up not growing as many plants as you successfully can. And so not only is this about growing as much as you can, but growing it successfully in a smaller space, because if you are in the GTA and you don't have a huge yard, you're going to be suffering from space. Okay, so this is going to help support you. All right, so that was just a quick tip that I wanted to point out there. Thank you very much for watching. If you like my videos, please like. And if you really, really like them, please subscribe to them. I need all the subscribers I can get. And if you have questions or comments, you guys do a great job of messaging me privately with questions and comments and constructive criticism, and I thank you so much for that. But if you want to put them on the public channels, you can as well. Okay, so this is Thomas Bloom signing off, and thank you for watching.